It has been put to me that COVID-19 is a contradiction. It is personal and yet global. It is invisible yet visible. It does not discriminate and yet it does. And against a backdrop of tragedy for those citizens who have lost their lives and their families, the bravery of our frontline workers, from medics, healthcare staff, bus and taxi drivers, supermarket shop assistants, postmen, emergency services and others, it is clear that we will not return to the normal as we knew it. What will the next normal look like? Who knows? But it is really critical to reconstruct for the future and not dwell on the past and trying to solve those problems of the past. It will be determined by countless decisions made by individuals, companies, governments, and institutions during the crisis. And it will rely on the impact of economic stimulus or austerity programs. So two extreme scenarios could be as follows. We could end up with less prosperity, slower growth, widening inequality, bloated government bureaucracies and rigid borders, or we might end up, hopefully, with a burst of innovation and productivity, more resilient industries, smarter government at all levels, and reconnected world. Turning our attention to the Cardiff capital region, most of you will know that it comprises 10 local authorities in Southeast Wales, home to 1.5 million people. It boasts two cities, Cardiff and Newport, and is responsible for over 50% of Wales's GVA. But it also includes some of the poorest communities in the UK and some of its wealthiest conurbations in Wales, with 3 local authorities, Blaenau Gwent, Merthyr and Caerphilly, ranking the bottom of the UK's 379 authorities for their low economic productivity. The city deal itself is a 1.2 billion 20-year economic growth programme. It is not a growth deal, as in other regions of Wales, which are project-driven. The 1.2 billion is split into infrastructure via the Metro project in the sum of 734 million, and an economic growth programme via the wider investment fund at 495 million, as funded by the UK government and the 10 local authorities. Its combined targets are to create 25,000 quality sustainable jobs, leverage an extra 4 billion of fundraising, and improve GVA by 5%. An industrial economic plan, an investment intervention framework, was launched last year. And it is evidence-based, but under constant review. It has to maintain its flexibility, given that we are looking at a 20-year program. It is built on 3 pillars of connectivity, competitiveness, and resilience. Connectivity, not just in the physical sense of digital and transport, but in true partnerships between universities, the public sector, the private sector, and social enterprise. And it requires absolute cohesion by government policy at all levels. It is competitive because we intend to be innovative. We intend to invest in R&D and the industries of the future. And it must be resilient to future-proof our region for the industrial challenges that we are going to face in terms of aging population, clean growth, artificial intelligence, and the future of mobility. It abides by the principles of scale, making impactful innovation-led investments rather than small activities. Small-scale activities and sprinkling the dust will never get us anywhere. It requires leverage to make our funds grow further, and we insist on return on investment. We are having to move ourselves away from a dependency on grants and pull together demonstrable returns. It will invoke ecosystem development of clusters and sectors of strength and industries of the future. It really requires economic inclusion, creating opportunities for all, and we must be evergreen. We must recycle these funds so that future generations have their benefit. Our real objective is not just a city deal, it is about building a region. So COVID-19 has thrust business and the Cardiff capital region into two distinct phases of reaction and adaptation. The reaction phase over the last 2.5 months has forced us all to protect our workers and reconfigure our operations or orchestrate shutdowns, some temporary, some final. It's made us address customers and business partner needs, and in many instances apply for financial support schemes, including the furlough scheme to help and protect employment, seeking deferrals from the Inland Revenue on VAT and PAYE, seeking government guarantee-backed loans under the bounce-back loans and civils, as well as getting reliefs from rates and rents. We're having to adopt innovation to keep going or hibernate in the hope of post-COVID resurrection. Turbocharging decisions on imperfect information has become the norm. How can we ever tell ourselves we cannot be faster and accept that being indecisive is a decision in itself? As we plan to move out of lockdown and focus on the return, this requires an open-ended operating plan, flexible to adjust for numerous sensitivities around anticipated activity levels. As the physical doors close, the digital doors swing open. It requires reimagination and scenario setting with the next normal, and a reform on regulatory intervention and competitive skills. We're having to see around corners. To get a sense of this adaptation phase, Gambit has conducted a survey by holding one-to-one conversations with companies of all sizes determined by number of employees and turnover, with broad sector coverage, including financial and professional services, construction and construction materials, business services, manufacturing, consumer goods, property developers, healthcare, media, higher education, fintech, edtech, and cybersecurity, to name a few. And amongst all of that cohort, direct COVID-related activity was undertaken by 50% of the respondees. They have been involved in a number of activities, from PPE manufacture to ventilator components, transport for frontline workers, kitchens for vulnerable adults and children, and fundraising. It has been a fantastic response to this horrendous pandemic. Turning to financial support, the job retention scheme, which has just recently been extended to October, will continue, and 70%, over 70% in fact, of the respondees furloughed staff, whilst only 10% made redundancies, and these were in the consumer, retail, hospitality, and transport sectors, as you would expect. But grant support was taken up by 40%, including rate rebates and some Welsh government-led emergency resilience grants. Bank loans with government guarantees, civils, were taken up by over 20%, which is actually lower than the national average, but then again, this could well come down to the size of the survey. I read some statistics yesterday that around 50% on a 500 company survey was the norm. Applications are still in progress, however, so we may see some more. And bounce back loans in companies under 250 employees, around 33% of the respondees took them up. Rebanking also has featured, and 10% of our audience took opportunity to defer capital repayments on existing loans. As far as redundancy is concerned, and the biggest preoccupation for many of us at the moment, 30% of the respondees are forecasting redundancies post-furlough, with high levels of layoffs in financial and professional services, consumer goods, leisure, manufacturing in the automotive and aviation sectors. Due to sector contractions, supply chain impact, consumer demand, and logistic constraints. These are the drivers of this. But there is a new one, and that is a realization of being overstaffed, on average by around 20%, and experiencing productivity gain. And this has got managers thinking about reorganizing their businesses. The range of redundancy numbers is broad and will be somewhere between 5 and 55%. Obviously, the larger numbers in those more distressed sectors. But when we asked the respondees as to their view on redundancies UK-wide, over 60% expect that number to exceed 2 million. Government estimates of 2 million job losses post-furlough seem to accord with this majority view, but it also equates to circa 20 to 25% of the 8 million individuals that are on furlough. Business failures will exacerbate this, and at the other end of the spectrum, what we will also see is this new generation coming out of university and looking to join the workforce, being unable to get jobs. And this is on top, of course, of the unemployed that we have currently. When asked about insolvencies, and bearing in mind in the Q1 of 2020, total insolvency numbers were around 3,800 for that quarter. The government's guideline on insolvency numbers is that anything above 5,000 is deemed to be in the median range, and anything above 7,500 is high. 75% of the respondees were in the median range on 5,500. Whilst insolvency practitioners are on standby, and furlough has really delayed this, it has actually put stop to the collapse of many businesses, as have the banks by introducing some of these measures. But bank behavior going forward on defaults is yet to be seen. And it will be key that the government are contemplating this bad bank to deal with what could be a substantial default crash. We also asked our respondees to give us a sense of how they saw the economic landscape. And we used the letter V to describe mild, as you've probably seen this in the press, which is a short, sharp recession, bouncing out of effectively a self-induced coma. 10% were in that space. The majority, however, chose a U figure. In other words, GDP recovering more slowly, somewhere in the region towards the end of 21, heading into 22. There were 20% of the respondees in the harsher and more severe sort of perspective. The L being the deep prolonged recession where many businesses failed and we face nationalization and we don't return into anything like where we were before COVID, before 23. Our business survey also took into account reimagination. And just give you a little bit of a flavor on this. Nearly 50% of the respondents said that they intended to expand their product range or services. Working practices by at least 60% were perceived to change, with training programs requiring that complete adaptation. Targets as far as financial returns, 50% came out and said that they expected these to reduce, but on the positive, 25% actually thought they would increase. Investment in software is definitely top of the list, hardware as well, and in some cases, plant and equipment, but over 50% could see investment. And unfortunately, but not surprising, research and development, decreasing investment to the tune of 72%. In other words, and ironically, it is this investment which really constrains the vital information that we need to raise productivity and emerge stronger. But as always, in a downturn, it is that element of expenditure that takes a back seat. To sum up this survey, I'm just going to run past you some of the threats and some of the opportunities that came out of the interviews. And it was amazing that most people wanted to talk. Most of those interviews took over half an hour, and we spoke to over 60 companies, as I said, spanning quite a broad range. But in terms of threats, and the threats imposed upon them, sustained social distancing, the impact of that on property investment, city centres, hospitality, the workplace, and public transport prevail. A declining consumer demand is a serious concern, and a buildup of institutional debt, tax deferrals, creating business failures, and bad customer debts is a serious worry. There is fear out there, and believe me, some of the companies we spoke to felt that getting people back to work was a major issue. There are now I don't know if you've heard the term, but the worried well is out there. And certainly in the professional industries, there are people who really don't want to come back to work whilst COVID persists. Price increases for manufactured supplies, tighter margins on professional services, supply chain reshoring, stock holding levels going up and working capital requirements, and maybe the impact of significant regulatory compliance, particularly in health and safety. On the opportunities though, UK-based manufacturing revival seemed to come back quite strong. A heightened environmental and clean growth agenda is emerging. Public sector outsourcing is an opportunity, whilst M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and stressed and distressed in certain sectors, particularly business services, seems to prevail. Staycation will outweigh overseas travel. A wider talent pool will become available. Geography is no longer a constraint, and a digital geographic expansion for new customers seems to be very much at the front of many businesses' minds. A leaner organization, reduced business travel will protect overheads and cut them down. But weaker competition could also be an advantage. And finally, just to sum up that survey, we asked the respondents to give us one word to summarize the next 12 to 18 months. And unfortunately, 60% were in the negative sentiment, words such as turbulent, terrible, or tough. Whilst on the positive side, 40% said interesting, hopeful, positive. Whilst three most popular words were challenging, opportunity, and optimistic. But there was one word missing, the B word, Brexit. It was not mentioned by any interviewee in this survey. So turning to reimagination, the Cardiff City region, it has at its front serious areas of focus, expediting the creation of resilient industries with thriving regional ecosystems. Semiconductors is already on its way. The compound semi-cluster is a world first, involving higher education and industry. MedTech is in the ascent. We are looking at medical devices and diagnostics. There is a significant presence in the Cardiff capital region. FinTech will not surprise you. InsurTech is an opportunity to differentiate ourselves from other FinTech clusters around the world. And digital and analytics have to be on the agenda. Accelerating our digital infrastructure program, 5G and wider geographic connectivity is a must. We need to review optimal transport and other infrastructure priorities in light of this pandemic. But at the same time, we also have to leverage co-investment and foreign direct investment too. We must not waste this crisis. So in summary, pulling all of those strands together, at the national level, we have seen the power of collaboration, including private and public speed of decision-making. But locally, there is a long way to go. We have seen that delivery is best left to the experts, whether in healthcare or delivering finance under support schemes or public service. We are learning that self-sufficiency and supply chain flexibility is more important than efficiency. We believe investment in research and development and innovation and backing future industries is vital for productivity gain in both the industrial and foundational sectors, creating quality jobs, economic growth, and prosperity. Digital connectivity, 5G, and wider geographic reach is a vital utility, focusing our training on skills for the future of work, addressing economic inclusion, all of which will make our region more resilient to shocks. It will not be business as usual. The world has changed too much, but business back better. And to conclude, the virus is still with us and not going away anytime soon. There is no quick fix, and the challenges ahead are enormous. And whilst the situation is bad, it will get better, even though it will still be bad. And as for the C word, in the next normal, it has to be collaboration. Business, academia, government, public services, and social enterprise must collaborate to overcome and return us all to a new normal. We can do this. Thank you.
Frank, thanks very much for that. There would obviously normally be a massive round of applause going on around the room. But for our first virtual, I can see some hands now. For our first virtual meeting, particularly under these circumstances, I think there's a huge amount of thought-provoking material in there, which I hope will generate quite a lot of questions. So as a reminder, if you just click on that, I've got a couple of questions I can see, but if you can click on that chat box, in the to box, put Scott Waddington, and then I will receive your questions. And Frank so very kindly said that he would accept some. So I imagine we're going to have quite a range. But I will start off with who we've got. So we've got Paul Thurman, actually, the first one in. You drew reference to staycations rather than overseas travel. Do you think that this means that Wales can benefit from tourism over the coming years? And how geared up do you think Wales is to capitalise on what would or could be a crucial contributor to the economy? The obviously question was asked in connection with your input to Bluestone.
Yes, well, having spoken to Bluestone as an outlier, and I should have been a little bit clearer at the beginning. This survey was very much regionalised, but I couldn't let Bluestone escape the questions because it is one of Wales's and certainly southwest Wales leading destinations. So they've benefited in some respects from other initiatives, in particular the hospital setup that they've got down there. But they furloughed over 65% of their staff in the interim. I think staycation is likely to benefit because actually at the moment we have an issue with returning to the UK as far as quarantining is going. And the fear is still there. I mean, the fear of jumping on a plane and not being able to socially distance is going to be at the front of mind for many families. And Wales has got some fantastic destinations which could benefit from this. I mean, in particular, certainly Bluestone, because of the way it is set up, there's plenty of space. You can, there is way to provide food and beverage by almost a takeaway system, so that it lends itself probably very well to this. But surely there must be other destinations in the region and certainly further afield that should be out there looking to take, because the number of holidays that have been cancelled is phenomenal. So what other alternative is there? And whilst we're in lockdown, it's very difficult to see where the options are. But I generally believe staycation is going to be around for some time.
Great, thanks, Frank. There's a question from Steve Berry, which is around the potential talent coming out of London. South Wales and the Cardiff region could be in a position to benefit, but that brings connectivity to the fore, and in particular 5G, but also infrastructure improvements. So the question is, how can we encourage this to happen given political and financial challenges?
Well, the trouble with certainly in my experience, getting talent to come back to Wales, and I mean come back to Wales, because most of the people that we've ever been able to attract, certainly in Gambit, from outside the region, it's because they've wanted to come back to Wales, tending to have sort of young families and wanting a change of lifestyle to move out of London. But to Steve's point, I really do believe that the future of work will change the way people are employed. And in some respects and in some professions, remuneration could actually become output-based. And once you start to move into that type of arrangement, then digital technology will prevail, and you will be able to seek the best litigation lawyer in a particular field in Manchester, and as long as the package is right, that individual might actually be able to work for several law firms. So all of those dynamics are going to change by virtue of this digital technology that we are all experiencing, and the fact that jobs, in not too distant future will not be permanent. People will be having several careers, which then lends itself to training and upskilling and continuous education. So all of that is up for grabs at the moment, and the sooner we start to entertain that, because if you think about it, the universities are going to have to invade the online space. They're also going to have to start chipping away at ed tech, because one of their largest sort of influxes from overseas students could actually start to dry up significantly.
Okay, thanks Frank. Next one, Robert Chapman just talking about resilience, but he felt there was little mention of climate change resilience. Is there any reason for that?
There isn't, because I certainly on the survey, that is up on the agenda. And in fact, as far as resilience is concerned, for the Cardiff Capital Region, it is very front of mind in our Challenge Fund outlook. So we take climate change very seriously. It is one of the most significant industrial challenges ahead, and we need to put more time and effort into it. But I also will say is that at the moment, this pandemic has taken everybody's attention away. And the problem with climate change is it is a massive issue. It is actually probably in the 3 or 4 most scary things that could happen to us. And I put pandemic at the top, and certainly climate change probably second, and World War III probably third. But actually, the trouble with climate change is getting the agenda in front of people, because everybody perceives it as being so far away, and when actually it is upon us right now, and it's trying to get that message across to not just to the wider public, but certainly to the decision makers and to government.
Okay, from Andrew Wakelin, how do you see the growth of B2C e-commerce in the next 12 months?
How do I see the growth from B2C commerce? Very difficult unless you're online. That's, the retail sector is absolutely going to be devastated by this. So I see huge opportunities for B2C online, and they're endless actually, because the entry level is relatively cheap. That's why we're seeing a lot of youngsters creating their own businesses in university. That's why we've seen a lot of startups coming to the fore. But it's all about the provision and understanding the basics of setting up any business, and that is understanding your customer. Me Too doesn't go too far for most businesses. They don't last very long. But I think certainly online retailing is here to stay, and that's the way we're all going to shop in future.
One from Stuart Price, I think a very quick answer. Many commentators are saying that UK GDP we'll be back on track by Q2 in 21. Do you think that's too optimistic?
I'd like to pray. I'd like to sit here and pray that it does, but let's be honest. I think we've got to start being mindful of the scarring effect as well as some of this. And one of the things that hasn't been mentioned but will hold us back is how do we get those individuals who are about to lose their jobs, if they haven't already, back into employment in those sectors that are expanding as they come out of sectors that are contracting. There's a huge learning curve to go through before a barista can become a construction worker, or somebody else can join the gig economy, etc. So that's a real factor in actually causing, I think, the delay in getting businesses back on their feet and taking advantage of employment opportunities.
Okay, Kate Bassett is asking, given the new focus on working from home for all of us, what do you think will be the impact on commercial property, i.e. office space in the Cardiff region?
That's a very good question, and depending on who you speak to, and we did speak to professionals in the property market, and indeed to property developers themselves. I think I'm always find it quite quizzical. Are we actually working from home or sleeping at the office? Because as far as I can hardly tell the difference these days. But to answer your question, I think certainly in Cardiff, Grade A premises are still in demand. I think probably offices or office-based businesses may require less space. So I don't think we will necessarily be as lavish. But let's be honest, we are a social animal. We do need to meet in physical sense. We do need to have meetings as we did, 2.5 months ago. So there will be a requirement for good quality office space. I suspect there will be serious problems in the sort of B grade and how actually they come to fruition. I wonder how we're going to cope with all of the student accommodation that's been built over the last few years if those students don't return. And I do fear for the city centre and the retail impact of our shops and what they become going forward. So there's a radical rethink required as to how we turn those properties and even some of those shopping centres into viable assets going forward.
David Snedden is asking, if you're able to, which sectors in your survey were the most positive and which were the most negative?
My memory isn't that good, but if I would just say, the most negative is very easy to look at. I think anybody who's in tech, whether it be fintech, edtech, even at the moment, are attracting attention. I think medtech, although it's been held back by the fact that COVID in the hospital scenario, both for pharma and medical devices, has held up routine operations. And one of my biggest fears is the second wave, which isn't the second infection. It's the wave of those poor people who haven't been able to have the treatments that they were due for heart disease, cancer, and so forth. And this is holding up medtech as a sector, but it will spike again and very shortly as soon as this COVID situation subsides. So the medtech is positive. As I say, any tech is positive. We're finding international buyers looking for tech at the moment because it's that innovation which enables them to have the spurt and penetrate new markets. So construction, sitting on the fence waiting for infrastructure projects. I think economic stimulus is vital, and that will actually help a lot more sectors bounce back.
Sort of leading on from that, Mark Powney is asking, do you foresee a trend similar to the last recession where we'll have a surge in startups and an idea of what the percentage will be in lifestyle firms and in scalable startups?
I certainly do, and startups, as I said earlier, are far easier to set up in this day and age. Clearly, they'll require funding, and it's all a question of how they actually access that. But it may, for many individuals, be the best alternative to actually create their own business and take that particular route into employment. I'm hoping that that will be the case, but as always, there will be winners and losers, and many startups don't last very long. The lifespan of most companies is such that a significant number don't get past their third birthday. So let's just hope that those that do get through are on good foundation.
Okay. probably coming to the end now, Frank, but Paul Thorburn actually asked another one, which you mentioned the significant impact and contribution by local manufacturing companies in Wales, supporting the PPE and supply programme. Do you think that this opens more long-term opportunities for a diversification of these companies, and do you see sort of being made in the UK opportunity conscious that if some of the pandemics, hopefully they won't arrive, but we perhaps need to be less reliant on overseas suppliers?
Well, he must be telepathic, because this afternoon I sent to the Regional Economic Growth Partnership a request to help an initiative which I've started with some of those companies that have been involved in the production of PPE and related products to help in the COVID pandemic. And where we've come to is this: we want to form a new membership group consisting of local manufacturing pan-Wales, so it's not just the city region, it's across Wales, and the foundation will come out of the COVID campaign, but it will expand and it will grow. We have some amazing manufacturing companies in our region, and in fact, one of the members that is due to join puts 80% of its subcontract into the local economy, and that's what we're looking at. This pandemic has highlighted the need for self-sufficiency, the need to have stronger ecosystems, the need to invoke tech in manufacture, and getting back to making things makes us safer. I'm not talking about complete localization, because Wales is too small to be able to subsist without exporting. But just imagine if some of you who are probably nearly as old as me might just remember that wonderful campaign, Buy British, Back Britain. And that's what we're going to do. We're having a new campaign, Manufacturing Wales, which is due to be launched in the next month or so. And to get pride back into making things, and to join those companies together, and they will carry a motif on everything they make, which will go into national markets, which shows that they are a quality manufacturer and that this product is of high standard.
Okay, final one. He's on my screen, he's next to you. Nick Speed's asking, back to offices, is there any indication that Cardiff will do better or worse than other cities for retaining offices? And how urgent is the need to rethink our city centre?
I can't answer the first part of that question, but I certainly know that our city centre has a huge requirement for a complete overhaul. It is, I don't know if any of you have been anywhere near it of late, but it is a very sad part of the city, and the sooner we can reinvigorate it, the better. I am certainly aware that the leader of Cardiff City Council and his team are absolutely determined to try and reinvigorate that city centre as soon as they can, because it is suffering hugely by virtue of this lockdown.
Frank, I think we've probably done more questions than you and I agreed, but because there's been plenty coming in, but I'll give you a break there. But thank you to everyone out there for absolutely loads of questions, which I thought was probably going to happen, and I apologise if I haven't been able to answer a particular one. We would normally have someone to do a kind of vote of thanks if we were on stage at the Hilton or wherever, but that's probably not appropriate for now. So I'll just sort of sum up. I think it's been great to have your views and insights over the last half hour or so. I think for many, it was good to hear a bit more about the Cardiff Regional Economic Growth Plan partnership, and explain how that potentially will impact for the long term in terms of bringing in prosperity, which sectors you believe will help drive that. I thought it was really interesting your view about reaction and adaptation in terms of where businesses are now and how they're going to move forward, and how decision making is going to be such a fundamental thing for business leaders. And I like the one about seeing around corners, because I think that's exactly how it is right now. And of course, your survey, the timing of it was very pertinent, and I'm sure a lot of people are interested in that. And of course, I'm sure they can go and look at it. You provided a lot of detail. I'm sure people will go back and look at that. But certainly there were some really concerning potential statistics and factors around redundancies and insolvencies, and the challenges in particular for young people, which I'm certainly concerned about. But there are opportunities too, particularly for manufacturing, which we just talked about, the environment, tourism, and businesses becoming more flexible. So I think your sort of final piece about business working collaboratively, I think is fundamentally important and right across sectors, because I think new ways of working are what's going to make all the difference. So Frank, thanks very much on behalf of the club and everyone here for taking the time to talk to us this evening. So turning out to everyone else, I hope you've enjoyed this first virtual meeting and gained some useful insight for helping to take your organisations forward in these unprecedented circumstances, a word that I know is being used a lot at the moment. We will be happy to receive any feedback and look to enhance the format if that's necessary for the future. So looking ahead, our next meeting is in 3 weeks' time on the 22nd of June, again at 6 p.m, when we will hear from Alan Franklin, who is Chief Executive of Alchemist, who specialise in compliance, health and safety and risk management, working with over 40,000 clients worldwide, and they're based just outside Cardiff. And he'll be outlining some of the challenges facing organisations as they start to prepare to get back to operating their business activities in the current climate, which we felt was particularly pertinent. On Monday the 27th of July, we have Deb Bowen-Rees, who's Chief Executive of Cardiff International Airport, who will be discussing the not inconsiderable challenges facing the travel sector in general, but of course the airport too. But please keep an eye on our website, as we may also have a further event in early June for you to book as well. We are continuing to work on the normal, if you can call it that, event program for next season. We do have a speaker program already in place. Details will be announced potentially at a launch event, and we will notify you about that in due course. But clearly, we will continue to monitor things closely and to follow government guidelines as to public gatherings and the appetite for everyone getting back together. So just to conclude, I would like to thank again our season sponsors, Brewin Dolphin, Cardiff Metropolitan University and Hodges. I would normally now be saying we'll move on to dinner, but unfortunately we can't do that together tonight, but I hope you enjoy your dinners at home. So stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you again on the 22nd. Thank you very much for joining us.